Welcome to another episode of Beyond Physical, where we talk about the mental, emotional, social, and at times spiritual benefits of exercise. We believe that exercise is more than movement, and this podcast is our attempt at sharing that message with the world by sharing our own as well as our guests' experiences and knowledge. If you enjoy it, we ask that you please spread the message by leaving a rating and review, or even better, by sharing with a friend. Now, onto the show. Matt, how's it going?
Good, thanks. And you? How are you?
Good, thank you. Interesting start to the day. Yeah, rather unpredictable, which will be the theme of today's podcast, is the unpredictability of self-employment and entrepreneurship, which I think is a really cool topic that we can both speak to quite, from a fair bit of personal experience. But Youth Day on day of recording, and significant day for South Africans, and I think it's cool that we made the time to get into record still, because I actually personally don't usually come in on public holidays, but for some other reason decided to continue with clients on this day. I think it's because I was away for a bit with the Myla, and what did I? Oh yes, I took study leave last week for a couple of days. So I thought, you know what, I've had.
You want to try and get back into
had enough
things,
off. I can just have an easy day on Youth Day. Suffice to say, entrepreneurship had other plans, but that's how the game goes. How are you doing? How was your weekend? I heard that you had some positive feedback on the Horizon merch.
Yes, it was good. It was a good weekend. Spent it with some friends and family, and a lot of people liked the Horizon merch that I was wearing, myself and my girlfriend. So that's a good positive, since we still have a bit of merch for people to come and get. So pull through and come and get some merch before it runs out. But yeah, it was a really good weekend. I'm currently changing my work schedule. So I'm starting to have more time on a Monday and a Friday, which kind of is so nice. It gives me that extra bit of rest, as opposed to like working every single day, early days, and then ending off late. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to that.
I think it's important that you restructure that a little bit, just given that you have the Monday, Wednesday, Thursday early start.
Yeah.
Because you open on those days, you do want to kind of get your work cadence to flow in a way that allows you to still deliver quality.
Exactly.
Because something you figure out over time is we have this capacity available to us, and we will obviously do an episode on burnout at some point, but we have this capacity available to us. But just because we have that capacity doesn't mean we have to fully deplete it, because when you do that, your service delivery suffers.
Yeah.
If you're running on fumes and on your reserve tank, then your clients are going to feel that a lot as well as you're going to feel it. But end of the day, you're there to look after your clients. So it's like, if you aren't fully rested, one of my online clients said they were advised by a mentor, you've got to take a break, otherwise your body's going to tell you to take a break for you.
Yes.
Where you're just going to crash, and then you're going to have to do that. So I'm glad to hear that you are restructuring things. Was there a moment or an epiphany that you had, or did you just kind of chat with Kez or reflect and go, you know what, I think I could probably structure things a bit better?
I mean, I've been in the case where, like, when I started in the industry, when we all start in the industry, it's quite, in anything that we do, you want to kind of be the best already, but you also need to know that it takes time. So initially when I started, like the first 2 or 3 years, I was just committing to everything, saying yes to every opportunity. And that obviously has had its consequences in terms of not getting enough rest, or my mind always being active about work or ways that I can improve, different training programs. And it came to a point in that early phases in which I would write a program, like 12-week program, look at it the next day, and I'll be like, oh, this is so bad, because my mind is not there. Even though the intent is there, like, I'm so tired that I'm not giving it my best. And I think from that moment, that first burnout phase, I kind of took a step back. And now when it started happening, reflecting with kids or like family and friends, I could see that it was coming on along. So it's quite nice that I could take lessons from what happened at the first phase, and I can prevent it from happening now, because I feel like if I had to allow it to happen now, the cost or the things that are attached to it would kind of the things that are attached to it would kind of cost me more.
Yeah, the
taking time off
repercussions
now
would be greater.
because I have more responsibilities here now at the Horizon. I can't just take days off, because there's so many things that we depend on as a team, and I don't want to obviously kind of let down the team in that case. So it's just about having a healthy relationship and understanding that there's more people that are depending on you, and we're all like a web. So we have to be communicating about the kind of effort we're putting in, and if it's too much for us, then we have to let each other know so that one person can take over, instead of it coming to the point where, okay, I didn't communicate and now something isn't happening.
And obviously, you being a coach, you regularly will deal with things changing. You know, people cancel, people get sick, you get sick. You don't have the most rigidity in your schedule. It's kind of it's part and parcel of how that kind of lifestyle goes. How do you, speaking about restructuring your schedule, like how do you manage or how do you deal with the changes that often come up? Being someone who's self-employed, you're setting your own kind of parameters around work, but then there are external factors that change that. It's not like, okay, you've got responsibilities at horizon, but it's not like you're clocking it at a certain time, you're clocking out at a certain time, and that's your kind of, that's how it's going to work. There's a significant amount, and I mean, also if you're not self-employed, there are uncontrollables that will also influence your clocking in and clocking out. But I think particularly someone in your position is more kind of exposed to that. So how do you kind of roll with the punches? Does it affect you a lot? If it does affect you, how do you cope with it? For instance, let's say you've got a client who's booked you at 5:30 in the morning. You wake up
Come
at
here at
4:30,
5:30.
you get here at 20 past 5, and you get a text message, I've overslept or I'm not
Yeah.
going to come in. What is your mental process around stuff like
I
that?
think maybe when I started, I would have a different reaction to it, because I mean, when I started, I didn't have as busy of a schedule, and I wasn't exposed to as many different clients. But as the years continued or move further, I learned to understand that that's how life works. Like, it won't always be that you'll have the perfect schedule. Even in the most structured job, there is space for something to go wrong, and you need to have space for something to go wrong or something not to go to plan, because you can't, like, when things are always going well and you don't have that space and something goes wrong, it can affect the project greatly. And that's how I like to view it with my schedule or with my kind of work year or work months, because it just helps me kind of not have unrealistic expectations. Like, I have an idea of how many sessions I want to get done in the week, and if people cancel some of them, I wasn't expecting to have all of them completed, so I'm not disappointed. And I think it's also just understanding that there's times where I am not feeling well. And I mean, if we all look at it without the titles and without the labels, like, we're all human at the end of the day. So we can't forget that there's times where we all get sick, or there's times where we're all running late. And that has helped me a lot in terms of understanding clients and helped me with customer retention, because when a client cancels on you late once, twice, or thrice, it's so easy to say, like, listen, I'm going to cut this person out. But if I think about the one podcast that we had with Tristan, the Caro plug, um, we were talking about going beyond the physical. And I mean, when you go beyond that layer with someone and you understand what is the cause of them being late or them canceling late, and they actually open up and they're honest with you, then you can understand to a greater level, like, why they are struggling to commit to these things. And unlocking that would be such a massive relief for them. So I try and look deeper into most things, and I try and make it can try and take a lot of things, even if it doesn't work to my advantage in that moment, and I try and kind of work it so that it can come out to a win, if that makes sense. So it's just about turning a lot of negatives into positives, and realizing afterwards that that negative was never really a negative in the first place. So it's more of a mindset thing. And I mean, over the years, I've kind of cultivated this mindset to the point that I won't be disappointed. I'll be more excited, because there's opportunity for me to improve something. There is maybe something that I missed out that I could have added in, something that I could have picked up in this person's body language. Maybe they weren't feeling well already. So yeah, I mean, it's just about kind of, like you said, rolling with the punches, but then also taking lessons from that and learning from it, and then using that to carry on through.
And then if you find yourself in a situation where you've tried to manage your expectations, but you feel like you still go into the situation with a certain expectation and that isn't met around a cancellation or whatever it may be, how do you then work through the frustration or the kind of whatever it is that surfaces for you in that situation? Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to manage my expectations. I'm not going to attach too much to this client arriving or not. Let's say Kez asked if you could do lunch or something, or your mom asked if you could do lunch, and you said, no, I've got a client booking at 12, and the client cancels 5 minutes before, and you live in the southern suburbs, work is in Sea Point. Now, potentially, you could have spent time with them,
Yeah.
but that thing has kind of happened. Like, how do you navigate that? Do you also have the same, like, just it is what it is kind of thing, or would that kind of be a slightly more challenging situation for you
Yeah.
to navigate? And if so, like, how do you approach that?
I think this goes back to one encounter that I had with a very close friend of mine. So I'm gonna go a bit off and then I'm gonna come back. So, um, at like that saying, like at start you have a bit of conflict and then you become the best of friends. So this happened with one of my colleagues in college, and we had like a bit of a disagreement, and I remember emotionally like there was a lot of tension, and we both kind of retaliated. But I stopped at one point, and I just kind of took a step back while he was still going through with it. And I mean, in that moment, I realized like, okay, I can choose to stop, and I can just let him express his emotions, and I can actually make peace internally with this, and it won't bother me. But he will be left with whatever he continues to do. And I mean, the next day we had a good conversation, and he was like, I'm so sorry about my actions. Like, I'm so sorry I continued that. And I was like, I don't know why, but for some reason I chose to stop because I knew that if I had to continue, it would never end, and that pattern would keep on coming, and the same thing would keep happening to me or happening to you. And it's the same thing I think about. And if I think back to like one thing, when my dad was in hospital, for example, and I was seeing clients, like that meant a lot to me. That time that I can see him and someone cancels and I've committed to be there and I could have been there, like it's hard for me. That was hard for me to deal with. And I remember I went like to a few visits with him, and I would go and like I'd be so upset and I'd complain. And he'd be like, "What are you complaining about? Like you here now." And it made me realize in those moments as well, as much as it's frustrating, it can affect us in moments where we actually, like the things that we're getting frustrated about because we miss moments, we take that frustration and we talk about it in the moments that we actually should be present.
And that's a
You
great
know?
point, because often, excuse me for interrupting, but a lot of
No
the
worries.
time, the stuff that's frustrating us is something that's happened previously or something that we are anticipating to happen. And that frustration often comes from the friction of trying to, be somewhere else that isn't here.
Exactly.
Where it's like your dad saying, like, you're here now, enjoy this. And I often find that happening where I'm kind of like, there was something that was irking me and kind of rubbing me the wrong way, but that has now passed, and I'm in a situation that would typically make me feel really good,
Yeah.
but I'm not feeling good because I'm too preoccupied with that thing that was annoying me previously.
Exactly.
And then it becomes a self-inflicted kind of
Yeah.
frustration.
And I'm pretty sure like there's been a lot of moments where I'm either with my girlfriend, my mom, when I was with my dad or with other family members, I'd be so worked up about something, like either if it's a client or work or personal kind of goals or objectives that I haven't met for the day. And I think that's also another thing that we touch on in this big, we touch on in our industry, because we work for ourselves. It's so much pressure that we have to kind of put on ourselves and make sure that we kind of meet certain deadlines or certain goals. But in those moments, you actually have a realization like, I wanted to be here. I was frustrated before. Now when I'm here, look how I'm behaving. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So, I mean, having more moments like that than I would prefer. Now I just I've been blessed or more fortunate enough to take a step back in that moment and kind of be like, okay, I was upset about this. I'm going to communicate with whoever it is in my space, and then I'm going to move on.
There's also a fine balance between, and this is something that the mirror that's kind of showing me this is like, it's oftentimes clear, because like and my mom actually previously also used to point it out a lot, which is my mom used to say, you exhibit toxic positivity. So I will be in a situation that is, one would perceive to be not a great situation, but I will 99.9 times, percent of the time, try and look for some positive element
Yeah.
of it. And my rationale is that life is difficult enough,
Exactly.
like
Why
stuff
do you need
is,
to make it worse?
why must I, dwell and focus too much on what sucks about the situation? Like, everyone knows it's not nice. Just try and look for the silver lining. But at the same time, there's a balance there, because you don't want to, and I think what my mom was getting at, and what Claire often tries to show me as well, is that it's not like there's absolutely nothing wrong with identifying with the fact that you are pissed off. Like, that's a human emotion.
Yeah.
Like it's like someone didn't show, that's annoying. Like, it's like time is precious. It's the most valuable thing in the world. If someone didn't show up, it's okay to be bummed out about it.
Yeah, it is.
But I think often something that I like to try and practice is I will put a time limit on it. So I'll check my watch and be like, okay, it is 11:32. At 11:40, I'm going to stop being annoyed.
Yeah.
Like I can be as annoyed as I want. I can cry. I can
Yeah.
shout. I can do what I want for the rest of that time, and then let's just kind of move past it, because
Yeah.
I kind of get to this, and it's quite a stoic kind of approach to it. But it's, what is the benefit in feeling the way that I'm feeling? Like, how. And oftentimes it's like, yes, you identified that something didn't go exactly how you wanted to go, and it's causing you to reflect and look at how you might change it going forward. But past a certain point, once you've given yourself that message, it's like, it's done now. Like, if
Yeah.
you're going to sit and wallow in it, it's just going to consume you and kind of be uncomfortable for you and for the people around you.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very, that scenario happens a lot when you are setting your own boundaries, when you are very much in the driver's seat. If you are in a self-employed situation, or you are an entrepreneur, where there's so many more things that are kind of, you are responsible for. You're the last line of defense. And I mean, this morning I got quite bummed out because public holiday, we had a slight shift in how we were going to manage the opening situation, and that didn't go to plan. I'm sure Gideon gave you a call.
Yes.
And that didn't go to plan. I'm sitting in Somerset West. I get a phone call 19
what do you
minutes before we're meant to open, saying who was the person who was supposed to open is, they're irresponsive. They haven't said anything, and it's kind of like, to our knowledge, the gym is now not going to open. And it's like, it's I found that very difficult to, like, my immediate response was, this is what it is. Right now I'm chilling with Claire. I want to be present. I'm not going to get to the gym in 19 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
let me just enjoy, let me just enjoy, I'm not going to risk my life trying to,
Yeah.
whip in my Hilux single cab when, going in between cars. So I was kind of like, I was bummed, but then I was also like, there's nothing I can do about this situation. And I suppose I didn't actually fully register how pissed off I was, because I was just kind of pushing it aside. And then Claire was kind of like, it's not okay. I was like, no, it's okay. It's fine. I was like, she's like, no, it's not.
And then you're like, yeah.
It's like, what? It isn't. It isn't actually. And I think having that little bit of reflection was actually very valuable. But it's also kind of, it's part of it. You don't want that. And especially when you are starting something new, the systems are not bulletproof yet. And, stuff is not airtight. It's not dialed in. You are going to have lapses, and you are going to have to step in and plug the line, and you are going to have to kind of figure stuff out on a whim when you think you're having personal time. That is just the reality of being in the beginning stages of something. And I don't know, it's an interesting realization, because everyone tells you that before, but being told that and knowing that in theory versus facing the reality of it is, they're two very different things. So, I think and I was chatting to another entrepreneur friend of mine, who he's just founded his AI startup, and in his words, I'm quoting directly, it was like, entrepreneurship is not for sissies. It's like, you get told all the stuff, and you read all the stuff, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it sounds like entrepreneurs are always playing the violin of, oh, it's so hard, but like it is hard. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
tough.
it's very different. I think it's very glamorized. Like you set your own kind of hours, and you've got a lot of flexibility, and you are in the driver's seat, which is all true. It's all
Yeah.
those are all amazing things. But the flip side of it is you're chilling with your significant other, taking some time, and then you get a phone call,
Yeah.
and it's it's time to put
Literally.
out a fire.
Yeah.
It's like, and then it's weird because you feel like you can't actually ring fence time for you
Yeah.
until the organism, as in the organization, is fully self sufficient. And I think that takes a while. That takes a long time. And I also think there's the element of comparison where you're thinking we should be at a certain point where we aren't yet. And also a lot of, I mean, I was saying to Mark beforehand, I think the same way, and also no experience here, but the same way having a child causes one to mature quite rapidly, the same thing goes with being self-employed or having a business, because you're constantly having to reflect and evaluate and take accountability.
Yeah.
And there's no way to kind of, oh no, I'm going to like point a finger and blame here, or like, because all the risk and accountability is on you. So there's no escaping, like, okay, the gym didn't open on time. What was my role to play in that?
Yeah.
No, like immediately it was not my responsibility to open the gym, but at the end of the day, it is, because
Yeah.
I'm setting up the systems, I'm steering the kind of direction of the thing. Why did that thing not succeed? Why did it not? Where did I fall short as a manager or founder or whatever it may be, that specific target was not met,
Yeah.
as big or small as it is? And I think there's so much benefit in having that kind of opportunity to reflect, but it definitely gets it's quite a it can be, I don't want to say burden, because it's a huge privilege, but it's like that. I think that element of it is quite tough, because you've really got to dig deep and think, like what,
Yeah.
and ask your team, like, how could I have supported you better in this situation? How do you feel that I, as your manager, could have shown up better in order for you to kind of execute on your task a little bit better?
Yeah.
And maybe there's a situation of them going, you know what? Absolutely nothing. I think I just had an off day. That's normal. That's fine. They could say, you know what? There's this element of your management style that just doesn't work for me. You didn't make this clear. And it would help me a lot if you could change the way you communicate that in future. There was a thing on Friday where Gideon and Sue and I were navigating something to do with leave and
Yeah.
overtime and things like that. And it purely came from my own shortcoming, where I didn't communicate something clearly, and Gideon kind of being the connector or mediator between myself and Sue brought that to our attention, where Sue had one idea, I had another idea, and we were missing each other.
Yes.
And then I just said, you know what, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I know that I should have made that clearer. And that's why there was this kind of, misalignment in terms of where we were both at. And it's, yeah, like I said, it's cool because it gives you the opportunity to reflect.
Yeah.
But it's also something it's quite challenging to switch off from, where you're constantly putting that mirror up. And I think it also actually transcends just a work context, because that carries a lot of value in other areas of your life.
Yes, of course.
But
And I mean, if I think about it, like when you mention the fact that it's hard to switch off, like I always think of how tiring it can be sometimes to deal with things. Like, I mean, we've all had incidents with it. It's like, obviously for you, it's been managing this gym and having everything that comes with it, and also being a coach and dealing with clients with it. It's like they can't make it, or there's personal things, or there's other aspects that come into play that's out your control. Like, we're still involved in that, and even though we can't help hands on, it still occupies a space in our mind. So how do you switch off from something someone told you, and you're like, I shouldn't get affected by this, but wow, it's like in my head. And even though they were venting to you, or they were just talking to you and they didn't want your input, you just still thinking about it because you're like, wow. But I think, like what you said, it's a privilege and it's a blessing to be in that space and be that person for people, and then also be able to see your business or this organism that you've created kind of be so responsive to when things go wrong or things go right. I think it's a massive problem when things go wrong and you don't see anything change. And when things go right and you don't see anything change.
Or you point fingers.
Exactly.
There's zero accountability.
And I think that there's a lot that we can look at and that you can see and you can be like, okay, I'm glad that this is the case, because it's so cliche, but things can be a lot worse, you know?
For sure.
And like when you look at it like that, that's one way to look at it. And the other way is that it just comes with the industry. Like the whole thing of not being able to switch off. That's a skill that you learn over time and committing it. You know, I mean, we read these books, like, I know we all are so dialed into self mastery and personal improvement. And the one thing that I've been striving for now is just the switch. I just want to get better at the switch. Like when I want to work, switch it on. When I don't want to work, switch it off. And that's like a constant battle, because there's always aspects that are involved in that. But what I've learned is that those aspects or those factors, controllable or non-controllable, they're all part of patterns. And if we can track those patterns, you get closer to finding the switch.
It is such a skill, though. You used the term, it's a skill to learn to switch that thing off. And I can definitely say, and it's difficult to pinpoint exactly which event it was, because I opened the gym 8 months after my mom passed. So it was they were very much they happened at similar times. So I'm not sure if it was taking full responsibility for my life after my mom had passed, or if it was starting the business, or both. But after that episode, that little moment, that 9-month period, I've definitely found that I have had to really try and learn how to refocus, because there's a lot of stuff that is constantly on, where, it's like, okay, I'm with a client now, but okay, this bill has to be paid, this kind of strategy has to be refined, this communication has to happen with the team, this leave has to be approved, this thing, and it's like, turn it off, like you're with a client now.
Yes,
That's where you're supposed to be. And then similarly, just, I don't know, there feels like there's a lot of like kind of enmeshment of stuff that is definitely starting to clear and kind of become more I don't know what the word is, compartmentalized, which has been a process. But I definitely felt like I was better at it before, and it hasn't reset, but I've kind of moved into a new space where I'm having to figure out how to navigate that again. And I think that is a thing of, just being patient with yourself, because when you do step up into a new place in your life, and there are a whole bunch of different areas that you are taking responsibility for that you weren't beforehand, it's natural to be preoccupied with them, because you kind of like, you're not yet fully confident that you've got a finger on the pulse of that thing. So your mind does drift off to it. But once you've reassured yourself enough through doing the thing over and over that you are competent in that area, you feel comfortable to not think about it. Where it's like, the time that I give to it, I will give to it. The time that I'm focusing on something else, I don't need to think about that thing, because I know I've given it sufficient time and effort and quality in terms of what I've put into it. But it is such an interesting one, like how you're saying you're trying to learn how to switch things off, because that's definitely been something that I have thought about a lot recently, particularly when I took that day and a half, 2 days study leave last week. It was a cool thing, again, chatting to Mark about how this degree that I'm doing is a lot more engaging than the degree I did previously, because I'm studying what I'm doing in effect. I'm studying business management and I'm managing a business. The content is much more, it's alive. It's like, I can see how this applies in the context of Horizon. But the issue is I'll be learning a certain concept, and then 15 different ideas about Horizon will come in,
pop up, and then you're like,
and then I'm like, I'm meant to be here. I'm not like, it's not about Horizon right now. It's about, what I'm studying. And you can look at that as a positive or negative. Maybe you're getting more out of the degree, maybe you're not. But it's just something that really highlights the thing of like, you need to learn how to just focus. which I think is a common theme for a lot of people, but I certainly find, I think as you have, that there's so much room for improvement around figuring that out.
Yeah. I
Because
mean,
yeah, you overstimulate
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. And I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, to add on to that, I think we were having a conversation. Oh, I can't remember when this conversation. We have a lot of conversations about this because I think that it's so important to. I think I like how open we all are here. And I think that's one thing that helps us grow as individuals. And I think that's something that also needs to be done more frequently and also with less tension or friction. But when we were talking about our schedules and how hectic they get, I remember we were all talking about it and we are like, how do we manage? And I said that in terms of my one, when I wake up early and I have to leave work late, you just have to kind of like, it's either that you're going to be stressed and not have opportunities, or you'll have a stressful time dealing with the opportunities. You know, like which one do you choose? And this is such a random like pull out, but like I think of this one DMX song, and at the start he says, "To survive is to suffer, and to live is to find meaning in the suffering." And I think that is such a like it's such a cool thing to think about because suffering doesn't necessarily have to be bad all the time if we adapt and get stronger and we can like kind of work with it or work through it. Then it becomes like something that we obtain. It's a skill that we acquire. And I think also going back to like your 100 miler, you obviously went through a lot of physical, emotional, and mental aspects or challenges going through that. And because you're able to finish that, that's one thing that can help you when it comes to obstacles. You can think of that as a threshold and be like, okay, is this the same? It's probably not the same, but because I've done this, surely this wouldn't be as hard. And I think we don't acknowledge that enough, you know, like when it comes to challenges, often it's so easy for us to panic or to stress. But then I'm like, wait, but I've been doing this for a long time and I've had obviously worse times than this. Why would this be any different and why do I need to panic about it? Why don't I just be calm and collected?
You sometimes forget that though,
You do
that you've
forget
been
it.
through
And
stuff
the other
previously.
thing is that when you in a it depends what space you're in as well. So like a lot of times we're quite mobile, so we're not always here at the gym, which I feel like is a safe space. Or when you're with your clients, it's a safe space. It's where you like it's like your place of power. You know, you're at your funness, you're at your it's like home ground advantage.
Yeah, you're
But as soon as you
confident.
go out there and then you quickly just get negativity thrown at you, people are saying like, oh, did you think about this or did you think about that? You know, at family events or social events, and you have to just kind of put a barrier up, and that also gets tiring. And that's why it's so important to take care of your own personal rest, so that that barrier can never like fault, and you don't let those negative comments come in. Um, and it makes me think back to like what you were saying earlier, where it's like the challenge of finding the switch is so hard, or like what I said, the challenge of finding the switch is so hard. And the interesting thing is when we find the switch, like we're gonna look for another thing. Because by the time we get there, we've developed and adapted so well that we've elevated our life to a certain point that we've committed to new things, we're investing in new things, and there's more challenges. So it's just like a collection that we create. And when you think of it like that, it actually becomes like a fun thing. And it makes me think that you could either choose to think of things as like a challenge that will end your journey, or either a challenge that will make you better and kind of help you continue the journey into whatever your end destination is.
But I think that is pretty characteristic of the stage of life that we're in.
Mm.
Obviously, can't speak to other stages of life because we haven't quite lived to that point yet. But I think it's pretty normal as younger people to constantly be looking for ways in which to build and improve and grow, because we are kind of finding our feet and figuring things out for ourselves. And it was really cool being Father's Day yesterday. I was chatting to Claire's dad, and I was asking him about how he navigated his 20s, because he seemed to have a very kind of he was like very it sounded like he was very composed through it, which
Yes.
which definitely contrasts a lot of people our age, at least now that I know of.
Mm.
But he also mentioned a lot of his mates kind of like got straight into grafting and doing their medical stuff, and it's, you know, it's very rare that I feel like 20 somethings are comfortable to kind of, you know, confidently move through that time, knowing that everything will be all right and that you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And then naturally, because of that, we're always looking for ways to improve and grow.
Yes.
But it's great to sometimes, and I think there's a balance of like leaning into that natural inclination towards wanting to grow and improve yourself and be better and figure things out and, you know, learn and absorb everything. And then also being like, you can take some time to chill every now and then.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, I was chatting to your client the other day, Greg, about learning how to rest and manage your workload. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, your 20s are for working. Like, it's like, that's
Yeah.
when you just redline it. Like, and there's so many different viewpoints on it, where you then kind of, like, if I think about my mom, like, she was very much big on, you know, taking responsibility, growing, developing, but at the same time, she was like, you need to know when to rest. So there's so many ways to go about it, but I also think it is pretty natural, especially when you're in a high growth environment where stuff is changing and growing and developing, like this space, to want to be better and improve, because people are doing stuff to push themselves, whether it's growing their coaching business or figuring out cool new ways to offer value in our classes, or how we're going to navigate potentially moving into a new space, like physically. There are lots of things that are just, you know, growth, go, and it's like that then becomes your norm. And to a degree, that's amazing, but then it's also important to know when to dial that back. And I think when we do have our burnout episode, it's going to be cool to kind of get stuck into that. But yeah, I think I wanted to actually take a quick moment to highlight small things that I do to try and get around the unpredictability of entrepreneurship and self-employment. And I think what are two really important tools for me, or it's one tool, but it's two things, is bookending your day with controllables. So starting your day with positive input and ending your day with positive input. It's a very vague thing, but it's something that you're in control of, and it's something that you do for yourself, and thereafter the rest of the day can ebb and flow as it must, and that's fine, because you know that you've taken 20 minutes to read something positive, or, you know, journal or whatever it may be, and then at the end of the day you've taken 10-15 minutes to just relax or read or reflect or whatever it may be, but it's something that you're doing for you. And I feel like that insulates us, or I find that it insulates me from the turbulence and unpredictability of what self-employment and entrepreneurship entails. Obviously, I'm still super green, you know. I mean, this business is barely 2 years old, and I've been kind of self-employed on and off for the last 5 years, so not incredibly experienced, but I've definitely found that those tools are really cool interventions to kind of alleviate how much of a stress it is when things don't go according to plan. It helps with that whole kind of water off a duck's back thing. I think that is why one of the things that I still find challenging to approach with a stoic mindset is when I get a call very early in the morning, and it's like the first thing, and I'm like, okay, you know, I've got to roll with this. It was an unpredictable, because I haven't created that initial 5-10 minutes of like, this is time for me. This is time to like just calibrate and kind of set myself up for success in the day ahead. Or if the end of the day runs away from me, or I feel like it runs away from me, like I haven't managed my time well, and then it's one thing after the next, and then I look up and it's like 8:30, which is like
Tough scenes.
half an hour before my bedtime. And it's like
damn.
shit, I haven't actually, you know, done a little wind down thing, which is, you know, it's fine. It's obviously, I'm fortunate to be able to create those pockets of time for myself, but I think that is almost a non-negotiable, and it helps a lot, because before I had that, I definitely felt a lot more stress and anxiety around things not going to plan, because everything felt up in the air. But if you focus on little moments where you can hone into the controllables, it's comforting. And then obviously, if you can as well, sprinkle throughout the day an exercise session here, or a bit of, I don't know, working towards something that's purely about something that you are working on personally, I think those also really help, because where unpredictability, I think, becomes extra frustrating is you feel like certain things take away from your time.
Yes.
But if you have filled your cup enough, you've got capacity
Yeah.
for that to be
You
taken.
can spend it, you
It's
know what I
fine.
mean?
It's
Yeah.
like, it's chilled. Like,
Yeah.
actually,
It's the same as budgeting. Like, if you
exactly.
budget enough and a cost that you didn't plan comes off, you're like, okay, it's okay, but let me just remind myself that I've planned for this. And it's even in moments like that, I think that a- also a lot of people done, like me myself. I mean, I experienced this, but even when you prepared, something that happens can still take you by storm. You know, like even if you have emergency savings or all these things, when something happens and you're like, and then you just take a moment to realize, okay, I save for this. I have like emergency funds available. I have all these things in place. Let me like kind of go step by step. And that's why it's so important to have that, and also have what you mentioned now, which is just like methods or like moments in which you can kind of, okay, I'm going to switch on 10-15 minutes of me just giving myself time to recalibrate before I continue for the rest of the day, because a lot has happened. I need to just reset and then I can continue. And then at the end of the day, it becomes a reflective one, and then you need to recalibrate so that you can let go of things and then rest. And it takes me back to the other thing that I was going to say, which I was actually supposed to mention earlier, but I forgot. But when you're in those moments and you're struggling, you need to have a good why. You need to just know, why did you start this and why are you still in it? And it's a constant evolution of why things happen, like I mean, if I think about my personal journey, why I started into fitness, it's because I had a bit of insecurity about myself and my body, and like what I couldn't do and what I could do, and I felt very limited, and I didn't like that. And going through that journey in which that I was able to start doing more things that I wanted, whether it's like physical, whether it's like feeling more confident when I go out into society, when I go to events, or when I do anything. Like that's one thing that was my why, and it's slightly shifted now into, I want to maintain what I've built so far and then take that as I age. And that's the biggest one for me now, which is I can't wait to get older, because a lot of people that are, I don't know, it's such a trend now, but a lot of people are like, when they get to their 30s or 40s, they're like, oh my word, like I don't know what I'm gonna do now. But we have so much. We are capable of so much. There's still so much that we can do. Like we can, if you, even if you're struggling with your lifestyle and your health, like it's not too late to turn it around. And I think that when now that we're in this industry, we're so fortunate to have the tools to kind of like cultivate something that we'll be able to take with us for years and years and years, and show our peers and the people that are close to us that it is possible to go at a, like until you age, whatever age, and still be able to do the things that you want to do. Maybe not at the same threshold, maybe not at the same level, but it's a choice. It's a mental choice. And if you have a why, what seems impossible becomes more possible.
Yes, and I think that's a great caveat to another super helpful tool around dealing with unpredictability in life, not just entrepreneurship and self-employment, is just as a general rule, I find, again, kind of a tenet or tene, however one pronounces that, of stoicism, is focusing on the controllables. What are the things that are within my control? X, Y, Z. What are the things that are out of my control? All the other letters in the alphabet. Let me let go of that and focus on the X, Y, Z. And that is the time that you give yourself in the morning, the time that you give yourself at the end of the day, maybe some form of exercise or mindfulness throughout the day, but like you are choosing to carve that time out for yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel that, just as I said, what causes the friction around unpredictability is stuff that's out of your control. That's unsettling. Naturally, we want to have some form of structure and routine. It's a very comforting thing.
Yeah.
So when that gets thrown out of kilter, it's like, what's going on? Like, I'm feeling stressed about that. But the way that you can kind of reduce that is by having things that you tell yourself, I'm going to do this thing, and it's a very low-hanging fruit, easy type thing to tick off, and you do that. And then that just allows whatever it may be in throughout the rest of your day to take place, and for you to be able to just walk through that stress-free, or with stress, reduced significantly. But if I can kind of echo the points back, your main point was to find your why and have a why, to remain connected to that why, giving yourself time, feeding yourself positive information at the beginning and the end of the day, and making sure to focus on the controllables and carve out some time throughout the day for yourself. I think those three key things are instrumental in just kind of moving through unpredictability as comfortably as possible. Inherently, there is discomfort in that. It's not something that typically people enjoy. I mean, sometimes it's fun to have, a little bit of chaos every now and then. But yeah, I think those are three pretty helpful takeaways for those
and I mean,
situations.
To add to that point, I don't know if you've experienced it, but being in this industry and being through the turbulence that it takes you, there's been a lot of moments where I'm like, either like with a friend group or with my girlfriend, or like in other settings where something happens and I'll be like, okay, and I'm so grateful that like I've been through, or like I've experienced things to the point that like at the same time I should be like paying attention to how things affect the day and like how things affect the plans, but I'm also aware of the other side of things where like it's actually like you can actually see outside of work that it's just part of life. And as soon as you realize that, it actually like, I feel like my work and my experience in work and this industry has actually helped me to attack so many things in my personal life at a better rate. Like I'll just take the same principle from work or working with a client, put it in my personal life, how I'd solve a problem. And it's just like evolving problem solving, like how can we better ourselves in terms of that skill? How can we take the smallest to the biggest issue and match up a principle or skill set that will help us deal with it at a better rate, or without having anxiety or immediate stress? Because it's too easy. Like I always say, like when I go into a bad behavioral pattern, I always say to kids, and it's really me talking and kids is just listening, and I'm just like, it's easy for me to go into this behavioral pattern, but I'm going to choose not to. And from that moment, that's like me doing the same thing that you do, where you say, okay, at this time, I'm going to stop, but I'm going to continue now. But I have to kind of visualize what the problem is, how I'm acting, and I have to acknowledge that that's not practical. And as soon as I do that, I'm just like back to reality, And it's unbelievable. It's an underrated tool.
It is an underrated tool. But obviously also to kind of reiterate, those kind of feelings and things are there for a reason. Yes. So it's important to listen to that feedback and not switch it off, because that's the same thing as getting a pain in your knee and running through it until you need to have your knee reconstructed. It's like that's what you're doing if you have an emotional disturbance. There's a disturbance within the force. Yeah. and you just kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to pay attention to this. It's not serving me or whatever. It's feedback to your body or your it's trying to tell you something. So you should listen to it. But also, it's the same thing as like with that knee pain. You're not going to keep doing the thing that's bringing about the knee pain. You're going to stop what you're doing. You're going to kind of assess the situation, go see someone, and figure it out.
Exactly.
You're not going to dwell on it. That's not going to make it better. But like the feeling is still important. But thanks for the chat, Matt. Thank you everyone for listening. It was enjoyable. I liked it. I don't think we've ever done a one-on-one.
No, this
Welcome
is the first
to 7
one.
Matt's one-on-one. Plus Mark as well. But yeah, that was really cool. And if you guys want to find us, Matt is FitHub17 on Instagram. Yep. I'm Sprenner on Instagram. Otherwise, you can find us anywhere online. Horizon.com, baby. Yeah.
Or on Instagram at HorizonZA.
That's in the outro now because we're dialed in, so we don't actually need to say that.
Double mention.
We're just getting used to this more structured thing with stuff at the beginning and end. But anyway, thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you all in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show, guys. We love answering specific questions. So if there's anything you want to know, leave a comment or reach out to us directly at HorizonZA on Instagram or email us at movement@horizongym.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Seb Prentice, and this is Beyond Physical.